Hey there, everybody. You're going to be hearing a brand spanking new episode of The Sorting Hat, but we just want to say we're doing kind of a review of the decade, and we'll be touching on some touchy stuff every once in a while. So we're going to give you a nice little trigger warning right now. If you maybe don't want to hear anything regarding like violence or gender or anything like that could be like, I'm killing it.
Yeah, or abuse or
overarching. We're gonna be talking about some heavy stuff.
We're not talking in depth on anything. Like it's not
we're morons
graphic,
and we're not experts on anything.
But we did want to give you just like, hey, know what you're getting into.
Yeah, please enjoy this new episode of The Sorting Hat.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sorting Hat Podcast, the show where everything and anything can and will be sorted. I, as always, am your host, Michael Barryte, joined by your co-host, Brice.
Should old acquaintances be forgot and never be a decade? It's almost time for 2010s to be over. I want to die.
Yeah, it's been 1,000 years since 2019 even started.
Listener, hold up a mirror to yourself and see how haggard you are. It's just, you had no idea, did you? This decade has been a lot, Michael.
Yes, it has.
Oh, my God.
we were like, oh, at the end of this year, we should just like sort the events of 2019. And then one of us had the stupid idea of like, what if we sorted the decade and then there's a lot.
Yeah, so let's jump into it. Like, what do you I sound like Philip DeFranco just then.
Yeah.
Now you can tell where I get my news from. I just like because he wants me to kick his ass, or I don't know. Is that what it is? Or like,
is that the vibe you get? Like,
no, he says something like, hit that subscribe button or I'm going to kick your ass. Wait, that just sounded like an old prospector. Never mind. Maybe I'm not watching Philip DeFranco.
You're watching some old-timey prospector.
Just trying to kick my ass. I don't want to talk about my love life, though. I want to talk about the 2010s, baby.
Yes. So, full disclosure, as far as like sorting bias goes, I'm Ravenclaw, reading the Hufflepuff.
Harry Potter podcast.
It's always a surprise.
Yeah, if this is your first episode.
Sorry.
Yeah, we sort everything into the Harry Potter houses of Hogwarts. Yes.
And we're not necessarily going to be going through in a chronological order for the decade per se.
Because we don't have our shit together enough to be doing that.
Never. Also, it's worth noting a lot of the things that we are going to be sorting, because we both came in for this one with different lists.
Yeah.
A lot of them are more like overarching. These are things that were on the rise per se.
That's
in
very kind
the
of you to say.
2010s.
We both came in with different lists. You gave me a list yesterday, and then I walked in and was like, oh no, what do I talk about? Reality TV?
They're downplaying, they're prepared. And they probably, honestly, like, there were some things that when I was making my list, I was like, I don't necessarily know that much about this thing, but I know that Reed can speak at length on it.
Speak about, not necessarily know what I'm talking about, but baby, let's talk about anything.
The hat doesn't necessarily know everything, but it does sort. So we're as qualified.
Yeah, neither of us have brains. But man, we're going to tell you where you're at, baby.
Yeah. So in terms of things that also just like ran through the whole time, that never got resolved, the Israeli and Palestinian conflict still not resolved. The war on terror still not resolved.
We haven't gotten peace in the Middle East yet?
No.
Not yet? Not this decade? Maybe next one?
Still haven't gotten the troops all the way back.
All right. Well, how are you? Okay, you probably like... Just because you are Jewish, probably have like a slightly better sense of like what's going on over there, maybe?
Only moderately.
Yeah, only moderately. But like, I feel like as a Gentile, I gotta be careful how I would be like, this is how I would sort this.
Honestly, even within like the Jewish community, it's pretty divided. So
right, that's the impression I get. So it must be really like weird to have talks about it, especially like if you don't know exactly where like your Jewish friends like fall politically necessarily. Is it something that y'all talk about like openly? Or
it's hardly a thing discussed, because at least with my other Jewish friends, it's largely just like, yep, that's a thing that's never like, it wasn't resolved when we were born. It probably won't be resolved when we die.
That's kind of sometimes how it feels like not to be like, like too pessimistic, but like with transphobia within the gay community and the queer community, it's like one of those things that's just like, yep, turfs are still turfing around.
But I will say, and it's one of the things that I do have listed down as a on the rise, I have just trans rights being like something that is more prominently noticed and recognized.
Trans people just being able to talk about it. Yeah, that's a big one.
So
but first of all, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we're sorting that.
That we're not sorting that because that wasn't a decade like.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. And then I guess trans stuff is also kind of the same because like we've always been here.
We've always been here.
But it's like always big news, guys. Michael is finally coming out to me. I'm so stoked. After all those times that you've turned down men whenever you have to go anywhere to socialize with me, and everyone's like, oh, that's a definite faggot. Is the bearded one a faggot? Sorry. I'm throwing hard F's like 10 minutes in. And the reason why I think it feels, maybe to people who are outside the community, it feels new, is just because of how quickly the language is changing.
Sure.
So because that can reframe it. Because
well, and I think some of that, sorry to cut you off, comes down to a more prominent call for representation in media.
Yeah, and I think
I do think is a 2010 sort of thing.
A more immediate access point for these marginalized groups to be online and therefore have the platform to speak up and go, y'all are just sleeping on all of us. Like, like we're not getting any of the help we need.
As a continued aside to this aside that we're currently on,
aside.
Just like in thinking about representation, I oftentimes recall and recount how lucky I am that when I was growing up, like there was a Rugrats Hanukkah special and like all of these things that did the legwork for me to not necessarily have to be an ambassador to Judaism for everyone.
Oh, whereas like you'd be like, oh, at least you have like a little idea of like, oh, we have a completely different set of traditions.
Right.
And
well, I'm just thinking because like when 9/11 happened in 2001, I saw many of my friends who were like practicing Muslims needed to suddenly like the weight of I need to now explain to everyone that my beliefs and my culture of like I'm Iranian, like that does not mean I am a terrorist.
And a lot of that, like you said, like you were saying, that comes down to the fact that most people didn't have like benign / like good reminders of like what those people's cultures are like.
Right. And like the only times that they were referenced in media would be like on 24 when Jack Bauer needs to take out a terrorist. Yes. And you're like, ooh, that's problematic. Yeah. So I'm going to just throw this out. It isn't on my list, but just like media representation of
marginalized
figures
has like it's like accelerated, even if it's not where it needs to be.
Let's start there. I say it's a Hufflepuff.
All of the media representation accelerating for marginalized groups. Oh, absolutely. But also I might give it to Gryffindor on this one because
it has been sort of fought so prominently and like we're just like fuck that, we're going to be heard.
I've only been dogpiled for homosexuality online a couple of times. Because it's always just been when I've spoken up and been like, that's pretty gross, that's you. And I would say that like my experiences are nothing compared to like say like what a person of color goes through if they also happen to be queer or trans and like if a certain like blue check Twitter account like quote tweets some poor trans person, they're getting death threats immediately. So I would say like the fact that like we still know these things and we still go, nah, we're gonna speak up because this is just important now. I would say like it takes a lot of guts and it has a lot of risk factor involved.
Oh, sure.
And that's like Gryffindor catnip.
Fair point. You want to take point on this next one? Speaking of points.
Oh, sure. I would say let's switch it over to a little bit. Speaking of media, like how our pop culture has changed a lot, especially in movies, because that's a wheelhouse you and I are both in a lot more.
Sure.
I want to get your perspective on what it's been like to see the superhero genre kind of just like take over Hollywood over the decade.
I mean, in addition to it being the superhero genre, it's just been Disney who's taken over. Like,
that's right. Yeah, we're just like one company now, right?
Yeah, because like Disney owns Marvel and Star Wars. Just launched Disney Plus, which I like, fell into immediately. I thought I was only going to do the 1 week trial.
Fox.
Yeah, owns Fox. So there are two things that we can sort of split from that. There's the rise of superhero and like the joined universe phenomena. I think like you can kind of pair the MCU superheroes and shared universe in one bubble. I kind of would liken that as a Ravenclaw, because if you're committing yourself to any one of these things, you need to be able to like delve into the lore and keep track of everything. And
no, it's like meticulous. Yeah,
your average, I mean, not that's dismissive to say your average moviegoer experience is completely disposable, because that's not entirely true.
Not disposable, but isn't necessarily every piece of media is not necessarily asking for you to dig in and try to find like gut-wrenching catharsis. And I don't think that necessarily has to be what everything is for everybody all the time.
Right. And there are certainly a handful of those standalone superhero films that offer exactly that and are just fine for that reason.
But we're having a conflict about it because we are seeing, just as a byproduct of them getting more popular, we're seeing like an elevation of those pieces in a way, like higher expectations even more than I would say in previous decades. And so you suddenly have these fucking like cuckoo conversations, like Marty Scorsese being told he's not a good film director because he doesn't like superhero movies.
That
conversation was fucking, as somebody who didn't have necessarily a dog in the fight, like I think Scorsese's great, but like, and I think Marvel movies are great, but I'm like, this is weird. Why? This is apples and oranges.
Because everybody enjoys cancel culture. That's another thing we can be sorting.
I mean, we can't. Yeah, because you and I will probably not necessarily agree on everything on cancel culture. So let's do that next. But yeah, I would say Ravenclaw's a great call for that. Maybe Slytherin, because I'm always on that material analysis.
Sure.
And also a large part of why all of this is changed also is just because, and we can talk about it going back more into media later, of just the way that like our audiences are changing and who are like going like, oh, this is who this is like marketed towards. It makes more financial sense to do big spectacle things that are easy to dub or just like not worry about like audiences across the seas understanding. And I feel like that's a lot of the financial bottom line is what is driving these changes, more than like passion, to be honest.
Oh, sure. I would definitely say that in the case of like the rise of Disney, that is holistically Slytherin.
Yeah.
Because that's ambition to a T. That is grabbing all the wonderful gems of childhood and going, we have them now.
But
so
those gems of childhood and the meticulous like fanatic way that people
and
just
farming of nostalgia.
Yes, that is all squarely nerd shit. That is Ravenclaw. Okay, so cancel culture. It's so complicated. This is like one of the most gray area conversations I think that we can have. And
we're starting pretty early on in the conversation about it.
Yeah.
So
we're good at pacing.
We'll try to go fast and loose on this. I would.
Because how do you feel about cancel culture?
I think, well, it's the interesting thing because it's popular opinion choosing to be judge, jury, and executioner without necessarily all the facts.
This is him defending Louis C.K., by the way.
Oh, certainly not.
I'm just
Come
joking.
on.
I ruined the episode.
But it is one of those things like it can be problematic and often is problematic because beyond just like, hey, this is a thing and everyone going, yeah. Fuck that guy. 9 times out of 10, it's a guy. So let's just say, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
But then there are those like outliers that we've seen a lot more recently where it's like, I saw on Twitter a handful of days ago cancel Billie Eilish because she made some remark about like not knowing Van Halen or some stupid
so
shit
funny.
like that.
I don't know that people were like seriously cancel Billie Eilish. I feel like those are already people who are like, I don't give a fuck about Billie Eilish, and then just wanting a reason to be mad at her.
Except that's still sort of fueling the vitriol of those people who earnestly and honestly feel that way.
And I love that we're canceling her and not from like maybe like the same like week of discussion. She also like casually mentioned that Drake is texting her and she's like 17. but he doesn't get canceled. Like, so that's where I have an issue with like believing that it's real, as far as like you said, like judge, jury, executioner. I will say the judge part is absolutely correct. The jury part also can be super like we'll be like you're bad blanket statement, because like I think we have so many stories, so many things, so much content coming at us. It's hard for us not to just make our blanket judgments and keep it pushing, because we just can't keep that much shit in our brains.
Sure.
I think, but the execution part, that is where I'm like, I don't know, because
I think
how actually canceled has Louis C.K. been?
I think it comes down to how high up are they when cancel culture comes for them.
Yeah, a certain amount of wealth just can shelter you from the storm.
Well, and not even shelter you from the storm. Like if Louis C.K., using him as an example, or even Chris Brown, like
we should probably put like a little trigger warning, because we're talking about heavy stuff on this episode.
Yes, yeah, we should.
Maybe like it's just like a text thing at the beginning.
Sure,
you can even make a little note of the timestamp if you want to cut this out.
I'll.
But also, audience, you can know that I'm looking out for you. I love you.
Yeah. So in terms of, sorry, I'm writing.
Chris Brown is another great example. Nobody gives a fuck anymore. He beat the shit out of Rihanna.
And so there's this idea of, was it you who was telling me about that book on like if you get attacked on
what's it called, it's like by Ron Johnson. It's called So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I think it's called.
And the whole ideology around it is like lay low for a little bit and then like slowly reintroduce yourself.
But like we said, that is predicated on a certain amount of influence and power,
right?
Because like this example, so basically this guy, he got dogpiled online and kind of got fascinated with the like what is it like to be canceled? What is it like to have people come after you and cancel you? And he went and talked to people. One of the people who was successful in being able to get over it and not have their lives ruined, because it does ruin people's lives sometimes. This dude was just rich enough. He had like had some crazy sex scandal happen, and he was like, the best way to combat this is to not give a fuck. Don't engage with it, and it goes away. And I think that just happens way faster and easier if you're rich and powerful.
Right. And I would say, like, if the people listed happen to have been a lower echelon, like they had just had their Netflix special or album drop and it was their first one and this shit came out, they're gone.
Right.
They can't, like, their managers and agents would drop them. Every publicist would be like, nope, goodbye.
On the other hand, that dude who everybody was fighting about each other on SNL because he got that racist dude who almost got hired to SNL.
Oh, yeah.
He was at one of their after parties like a few weeks ago. So how canceled was he actually? He's still getting all the benefits of being in that industry. He's just not on their payroll.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to fully... It's tricky. Where do you think it lands?
This is some Slytherin shit, because this is really just like, it's...
Oh, see, I see it as a Gryffindor.
Because I think of this as like, what's that play about the witches? The good one.
Yeah, The Crucible.
The Crucible.
The one that we've sorted on this podcast.
And I just said the one about the witches.
Which, the best part about you saying that, I initially...
The good one.
Well, the funny part is, I initially thought you were referencing The Crucible, and then you said the witches, and that actually threw me.
Because they weren't actually witches.
Like, so I was like, what the Anyway.
Oh my, okay, thank you for knowing my brain.
It's just very funny that I was then thrown by
It's
that.
both like, it's like that, if it's real and it's not real at the same time. It's a very strange situation where, like, for certain people, this is an absolute real thing that's happening. People's lives are getting ruined.
Yeah.
Or, like, being vastly inconvenienced at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people, it's like an illusion. It's Felicity Huffman, like, you know, going to jail for 14 days
Mm-hmm.
in circumstances where, like, a woman of color would have gone to jail for fucking years.
Yeah.
Like, a woman went to prison for years because she lied about her address so her kid could go to a better school. And then Felicity Huffman goes to jail for like 2 weeks because she's rich. Yeah, that's why I'm saying, like, it just depends.
Well, I would say, like, that's speaking on the, like, disparity within, like, the wealth gap.
Yeah.
But I would say the actual, like, cancel culture itself is, like, big swinging, like, we're going to destroy you, which I think is more Gryffindor. Just in the fact that it's destructive and,
if you
and
have
not
noble
necessarily
intent, but if you're like, I just want to fuck this person's life up.
I would say even if it is coming necessarily from like a part of I don't like this person, still coming in a little bit more brash, because I would describe cancel culture I see as more of a wrecking ball than this calculated like domino mousetrappy thing, which like that would be, you know, the end of a series finale where like this person is caught with this, and like he calls this person and the person's already embezzling with like, or like.
Okay, here's what I think. Here's how I could agree with you. If we would reframe what you're talking about, like, as like, usually just like, I want to hold this person accountable. I think that's fucking awesome and brave. But I think that there is like a real contingent which makes us think that cancel culture is just a bad thing. There is every once in a while just a dipshit who's like, I know, like when fucking right wingers pretend to get mad at their fucking Keurig and break their Keurig.
Sure.
They're not actually mad at Keurig. They just think that like this is a way to like make the libs mad.
Right.
Or they just want to like act out.
I guess I still find, even if it is a moderate degree of I would go so far to say that revenge is a Gryffindor.
That's okay.
So, and like on that basis, I feel like cancel culture, whether it's noble or malicious, it kind of is just like bold dick swinging, like, let's see if we can knock this person down.
I can respect your opinion on this.
With that said, let's shift to just like less abstract and more like hard. On this date, this happened.
Okay, give me one.
Well, in 2011, we had the assassination of Osama bin Laden. That is undisputedly like a big deal for the 2010s, which when I was looking it up, I for certain thought that this happened later in Obama's presidency than it did. But
no, because it really was. We were still trying to grapple with the fact that Iraq was like a big sham shit show. We felt we were still feeling like the victimization feeling of 9/11. Like that, even that much later, you know, through the country, and so all of this was so messy, and there was a desperation to just even get like a token of a win, because that's like American, like, you know, Americans like. We don't like the idea that we got accomplished. We don't like the idea that we got like sucker punch and we weren't able to like do anything back. And so much of like the wars that we fight are just like us feeling like frustrated that we can't get a good swing in.
Well, it's also very hard to win against an idea. Like,
especially one that's bullshit half the time.
Well, just like the war on terror. That's an impossible war to win.
Like the war on drugs. Yeah, exactly. Like any of those like abstract things. Yeah, and so it was like, if it like was a source of comfort for to know like we got him, we wiped out the terrorist issue, and then of course like other places, ISIL, like on the up Proud Boys,
like, so would you go so far to say Osama bin Laden's death was a Gryffindor, or is it more of like, or is it
because I like. While I'm okay with that dude not being alive, I also just don't necessarily think that was done with the American people, like the actual American people's best interest. We want to make these people's lives better. I think it was like just a token to be like, don't worry, we're going to keep you scared still, but we're going to make you feel like we're the authority and that we're going to take care of you and give America, like the government giving America a false sense of security.
Where does that lead you then?
Slytherin.
Yeah. It's me just being like, yeah, Reed, it's very nice that you're saying all these things, but like, what's the sorting? Because we got a long ass list.
And then this is like technically for 2020, and I don't have the exact date of when it happened, but one of my biggest news stories, I was kind of breaking it down for you a little bit, was that the pharmaceutical company Gilead, I think that's how you call it, they were the the pharmaceutical company who had the patent for the HIV prevention and like what you would take if you are HIV positive
Right.
to stay out of like to not go into AIDS.
Yeah, to keep your T cell count
yeah.
like
They were the
okay.
people who had come up with one of the most effective medications for this that they had the patent for like decades. And it was this year that they decided to make it generic, and it took a lot of political pushback on it. And the reason why this is so impactful, I say for the whole decade, but even it's going to be even more far-flingingly important, is like if you think about it, if you're especially if you're not a person of color or a person in the queer community, HIV has been a crazy epidemic. It like wiped out a whole generation of queer people and people in other countries that we just aren't going to get those voices back. We're not going to get that entire generation back. And a lot of it was the government not wanting us to be able to thrive.
It was willful negligence.
Yes, like they jacked up the price exponentially in the same way that they do with insulin, where it's like 400% more expensive in its price than it takes to produce, and people have to like end up rationing their shit. And then in the same way, like people in like where like the epidemic's still bad, like even continents like Africa or like around here, like queer people live in poverty all the time.
Right.
It was just inaccessible. So it was like genocidal to a certain extent.
Yeah.
To people of color and to queer people. And it's like amazing now that like we finally got like major politicians like AOC to like really go, no, we're breaking the patent, we're getting it, and it's going to be available over the counter,
which is huge.
Yeah,
like
PrEP will, but also PEP, which is kind of like the HIV equivalent of the morning after pill.
It's just very nice to know that over our lifetime, something that was effectively a death sentence is now so like not as treatable as like the common cold, but it is so much diminished in its severity
to the point that it's going to be helpful for the stigma, because that is the thing that still remains is people are just as afraid. I'm sure you can relate. Like you're probably more afraid of like if I had unprotected sex, HIV would be in your brain just psychically. HIV is far more frightening than like syphilis or whatever. You would, if you got syphilis, you would still be like, oh my God,
right?
But you weren't going to be like, am I going to die?
Oh, I mean, there are all those urban legends of if you go to a concert and someone like pricks you with a needle that is labeled
you're that's a death sentence.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you happen to be someone who's positive and you take your PrEP dependably every day, your T levels will get, or whatever it is called, it will get down to the point where you're called what's undetectable. And that means even if you had unprotected sex with somebody, you would not be able to transmit it to them at all.
Oh, whoa! I didn't know
That is like
that.
So there are people with HIV, if they know their status and they're taking care of themselves, who are actually in far, far better shape and a lower risk to you than a person who is not HIV positive but just doesn't check their status.
I see.
Yeah, it's wild. And so I think even straight people need to start thinking about these things, because while HIV rates have been dropping, or at least being more manageable and like not a death sentence, all other STDs or STIs rather are on the rise.
Right.
We're having some of the worst breakouts in like gonorrhea and syphilis that we've seen in our culture before. It's wild because people are just like, well, as long as you don't have this,
So how would you rate that?
Oh my God, Gryffindor.
Rate that, sort that.
Gryffindor. No, like because it was, like I said, it's marginalized people demanding that a huge superpower respect us.
So with that, you brought up something that I was like, oh, I don't have this listed. It's another ongoing one, but the opioid epidemic.
And it's also...
Would we describe that as exclusively a 2010s thing, or...
I just don't know how... I know that's when everything started to get out of control with them not regulating it, right? And the use like kind of skyrocketing. I would say this could... but I just don't... I'm not a drug expert, but it's it's in the conversation more than it ever
Sure.
has been.
Yeah.
And it is.
And fentanyl isn't helping anything, because are you familiar with fentanyl, like, at all, as far as
What is it?
So basically it's a synthetic opioid, which
Okay.
is far easier to produce and
It's more dangerous, right?
significantly more potent. Like like 2 grains of or 3 grains of it, I believe the statistic is, like, can take down an elephant.
Because like people will put that in other drugs too, right?
Yes, they mix it with other things, so it is.
I sound like such a nerd.
So it's.
I'll just say, like, I mostly just do weed, so I'm always like, what, fentanyl? What's this Breaking Bad
but
shit?
cartels are cutting things with fentanyl because
It's
being
cheaper?
synthetic, it's so much easier to produce and acquire, and making all the drugs that are, traveling about a lot more problematic.
I think, like,
I would describe probably the whole epidemic as a Slytherin.
yeah, no, and part of it is also an ego thing of, like, the war on terror, thinking that we can just solve the war on drugs by throttling it to submission. I think, like, decriminalizing it is going to be the only thing that can help, because then it will take some of the influence away from groups like that who are doing unethical practices.
It's
with their
tricky
drugs.
because fentanyl is, like, used within our, like, medical systems and
gotcha.
everything like that. Like, it's something that is, like.
No, and you're right.
Medical
Opioids are something that you can get prescribed. So,
exactly, and it's the fact that they're being overprescribed that we're getting all these people who are suddenly finding themselves with an opioid dependency, and then they are cut off, and so they go, "What can I get that matches this?" And unfortunately, the most accessible thing might be heroin, which Lord only knows what that's
like. You know what that makes that's why I'm so mad. I feel like despite, like, what it's always been called, I feel like weed is like the anti-gateway drug. Because if these people had accessibility to legal weed, do you think as many of them would be going to other drugs like that?
Well,
I just don't know.
I mean, I think it's tricky to say because in most cases opioids are, presented as an alternative or
like
as
a pain management thing, right?
Pain management thing. I don't know if the severity of the pain would necessarily be muted or helped by simple like
THC
treatment, THC and everything.
I don't know. It's just like, it's so complicated.
But there has to be, like, it just seems so extreme that we're like, hey, what's something that is so potent? Granted, I've clearly never experienced any degree of pain that would warrant something like this.
Nor like do either of us, I think, have like the lived experience of trying a harder drug to know like what that experience is like. But just knowing from like talking to our friends who are sober or in, getting or in their process, in their journey, like they are Gryffindors through and through.
It seems like gross negligence on the medical community and also the governments that are sort of navigating and restricting these sorts of things.
And then just us as a culture stigmatizing weakness and seeing it as a value judgment. So people feel like they constantly have to be managing their feelings, managing their pain. And I feel like that's a big tie of it. It's like you need to be American exceptionalism and individualism also makes it so like you have to hide your pain constantly. And I feel like that's where that's coming from a lot of the time too. What else should we talk about?
In the medical field, continuing sort of in this space, are you familiar with CRISPR at all?
CRISPR?
Yeah. So I should bring up like...
Is that a salad thing? I don't eat those.
No, it most certainly is not. So CRISPR is basic. It stands for clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats.
Now I can understand why they went with an acronym for it.
Basically, it's gene splicing.
Whoa.
and it's been like it's a genome editing method where you're basically cutting out strips of DNA to like help and curb all these sorts of diseases, and I'm doing a terrible job explaining
Is it like the genetic or like the medical version of like how we like splice like stuff in like foods and stuff when we are trying to like make like GMO shit? GMO but for our bodies, or
yes. Yes, maybe.
Am I a moron? Science nerds.
But basically,
out there.
like the use of CRISPR has become more popularized in the like past 10 years or so, with the whole idea of like, we can look into like this gene and effectively like cut it out.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, that then brings up all the ethical implications of like, should we be doing this? Like when the Chinese,
the plain gods,
when the Chinese doctor announced that he had cloned a human baby or something like that.
Oh, did that happen for real?
If memory serves correctly.
Whoa, I knew that Barbra Streisand has like cloned her dogs. She has like, I think she did the same dog more than once. Isn't that wild?
That is.
Or if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, gays. But I know she did it at least once.
You're just apologizing to the gays on that one.
The gays they'll come for you if you get stuff wrong about their divas.
Oh, I understand.
Like, it's important to know how many dogs Barbra Streisand has.
I get you.
And how many times she has repeated the same dog.
Oh, so reading up on this a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
CRISPR uses gene editing in bacteria. The bacteria captures snippets of DNA from invading viruses and uses them to create DNA segments known as CRISPR arrays. CRISPR arrays allows the bacteria to remember viruses or closely related ones, and then if the virus attacks again, the bacteria produce RNA segments from the CRISPR arrays to target virus DNA. So it seems like that is basically upping the immune system, or maybe this is specific
to that need.
Yes.
Okay. So like overall is the idea of like going in and starting to like, splice and dice our DNA. Is that good? Is Jurassic Parking ourselves good? I don't know. I feel like it really, because that gets more even into like philosophical, like theological things, like of like how much power should we anoint ourselves in our own progress.
It is worth noting, according to this article that I'm reading, most of the changes introduced with genome editing are limited to somatic cells, which are cells other than egg and sperm cells. These changes only affect certain tissue and are not passed from one generation to the next.
God. Okay, so like as long as it's like always like net good and it's not necessarily trying to do any eugenesis shit or anything weird, I always try to find these developments, even with like stuff like more simple like GMO foods. I'm like, if it's not actually harmful, it feels weird to be like, no, we're not going to make this development. You people can starve when we could make plentiful food that's GMO. You people can just like whatever your issue is that could be solved with CRISPR technology. We're not going to do that because I believe in God. Like that's where sometimes where it seems to fall as simply.
Sure.
or because I just feel icky about eating a banana that doesn't have as many yellow spots. Like that. It like sometimes I'm just like, oh, your own weird ego is the only reason why you don't want these things to happen. But then I'm also like, is it weird ego that is driving us to perfect everything to a point that is perilous? I'm just not. I don't think I'm educated enough to have an opinion on this.
There's a part of me that feels like it's Ravenclaw.
Do you ever just sit there and go, this is above my pay rate, baby?
Oh, I mean, that was me and what was it? Oh, I was going to be listing the discovery of the Higgs boson, but I've watched 4 videos on it.
It feels like the more you know about it, the less you understand it.
I was watching Hank Green speak, and as he spoke, I became more confused. And I felt like I just needed
that sounds like Hank's footnote
fault. After footnote.
What if I try to start a feud with Hank Green?
It's one of those things where I felt almost akin to when I was reading A Clockwork Orange and I was constantly flipping to the glossary. But by the end of reading A Clockwork Orange, I had an understanding of exactly everything that was being said.
That book rules.
It's great.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
It's very cool how you slowly stop. It's an interesting lesson of just context clues, but also how quickly and malleable the mind is to like pick up.
Yeah, and like also like, just youth culture, how they're especially sponges for that sort of stuff. And that's why they shape the culture in so many ways.
Right.
Read Burgess if you haven't before. I think that like his work is even more prescient today because I feel like young people are feeling a sense of nihilism and it's like really affecting because of how like apocalyptic, if I kind of got that word right.
You did.
if it's very easy, I feel, if you're a young person, to be like, fuck it, why should I even be a good person
Mm-hmm.
if like the world is going to be terrible to all of us anyway?
Right.
And I feel like those themes that are in the book, like fucking what, 50 years ago at this point?
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's always so
It
crazy.
feels like it could have been written today.
Yeah, when the zeitgeist of now is predicted as like fiction.
And it's especially funny because they're in this like the kind of neo future Britain of the past, you know, it's like the 1960s version of what the future will look like. All these kids are it's very funny coincidentally that all these kids are super obsessed with Russian shit still.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was such a good predictor of like Russia's going to be like fucking with our culture and our politics in a way that like nobody could have like anticipated, I think.
Yeah. And that was even, I mean, that was at the very start of the Cold War.
But I guess that could just be me, like, speaking as somebody from a younger country. And I was like, oh, yeah, conflicts last for decades and decades, you moron.
Speaking, we need to sort this, right?
Yeah, where would we put that one? Oh,
Ravenclaw?
Yeah, Ravenclaw. Because in my opinion, if we don't have, like, an ethical, moral dilemma,
yeah,
it's just progress.
You're going in with precision. You're like, hey, we know this.
Or hopefully people are.
Yes. To that end, as we shifted into Russia a little bit, so we're talking like geopolitics.
Yeah.
The rise of China.
Oh yeah, like just like both as its own entity that can affect our culture, like pop culture, media, and everything like that. But then also like their own inner workings. What's going on over there right now is insane in terms of like expression suppression. I'm sure to anybody who's been paying attention better in the past decade, but it just suddenly feels like China's firmly in the driver's seat of a lot of our American culture at this point.
Yeah, I mean the fact that over the past, I want to say 6 months, both Blizzard and Disney got in some degree of trouble based on their siding with remarks about Hong Kong, like
another topic I can't even begin to say like, oh, I can talk
in
detail about this stuff.
I certainly have tried to go down the rabbit hole and gotten lost at like the entry point.
Right.
So
and like especially with America's fear of communism, it's very interesting to see how we still have to have like a working relationship.
We're bending over backwards in many ways.
Yeah.
Or our companies are, not necessarily our governments, because like all these tariffs that were thrown at China. Hooray.
Oh man, we're gonna see how that shakes out in the coming decade. Where would you sort this?
I mean, I would. There's a part of me that wants to say the rise of China is a Gryffindor, but also there's this weird part of me that is like, could it be a Hufflepuff?
Oh, why?
Off of like the hardworking nature of China, just because like they've been not like in the back seat for a while on the global side, but they've just been like consistent. And I mean, then you can just argue they've been waiting to strike, which would make them more Slytherin.
Like, I like not even like they like I always separate. Also, you always got to separate like these countries from their governments too, and be like, mostly I would see as a Slytherin, because like the most clear example I can give to like other lay people is like how I realized it was like when the Olympics happened there. They were highlighting how beautiful the country was and like how successful they were, but then you were also seeing stories that like right outside of where the Olympics were taking place, people are living in crazy poverty.
I mean, I feel
like it's a lot of illusion of prosperity, the same way that America is
although that
it.
tends to happen with every city or country that's hosting the Olympics. Like there was, what was it, when Rio happened, there was like, oh, there's a bunch of like very unfortunate circumstances around like the poverty, like right outside. And I mean, I'd love to believe that when the Olympics are hosted in Los Angeles, that our poverty problem will be fixed.
Like our poverty problem, but also like even our infrastructure. I literally don't know if we have the capability to host the Olympics the way that it will, like, the amount of people who will just be coming in.
The way that they've at least been pitching it is like, it's one of the reasons why they started on their the subway program as far back as they did. That was one of the reasons. They're like, we're going to have the subway up and running. Also, there's not going to be like some unified singular place that all Olympic events are held. It's going to be scattered across the entire city, which should spread traffic and da-da-da-da-da.
Even that, I'm not 100% sure. And a lot of people don't, a lot of the middle class don't ride the trains or the buses here, and they don't realize we're already pretty full. Like, it's a myth that people don't take public transportation in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Because I take it myself.
The Red Line is great.
Oh, I love our trains, actually. Like, I just wish they went more places, but the rich,
working on
they
it.
block
We're working on it.
So I'm just like thinking about, like, if I'm standing room only on most of my morning and evening commutes, I cannot imagine what's going to happen when we have that many people descending upon us. So yes, but going back to China, yeah, I would say it's probably a Slytherin or a Gryffindor. I can't say. I don't know.
Let's say Slytherin and move on.
I want to get your perspective on what the decade's been like for video games.
Okay.
Is there anything in particular that you think that we need to talk about?
Well, there's been the rise of mobile gaming overall.
Like, for sure.
Like, we entered an age where, and when I'm saying mobile gaming, I'm not speaking 3DS, PSP, like any.
No, we're talking like on your phone.
I'm talking on your phone, and specifically within that, we obviously, like, we started with things like Candy Crush and Angry Birds, but now it's straight up like you can be playing Fortnite on your phone.
Yes, or like you have these like waves of popularity for mobile games that we've never seen before, like Pokemon Go. I think that's even like that, even though it's not necessarily as popular anymore. The fact that it got as much of a surge in popularity.
Full disclosure, I'm still playing Pokemon Go.
Oh, full disclosure, he is maxed out his. Are you still maxed out?
I'm level 40. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Although I am tapering off, only because I fell into the hands of another trash tier game.
What is it?
I started playing Mario Kart Tour.
And that's on your phone?
It's on your phone, yeah. And this brings us to actually like the big crux of mobile gaming, which is freemium gaming or free to play with some sort of subscription model, or you can buy diamonds or whatever, and they will help you get farther in the game. Be it that or a Raid Shadow Legends, any sort of MMO grind-based RTS sort of stuff.
That entire marketing thing, that's a straight up Slytherin.
It's a Slytherin.
With the worst, but like 100%. A bad Slytherin. Like, because it's mostly preying on like the fact that people aren't good with their money. But the people who are the most not good with their money are children who don't think through those microtransactions.
There's the idea or the concept, they're known as whales within the community of they're people who are going to dump hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's also the idea of a price anchor. So I'll use actually Mario Kart Tour as an example of this. So within Mario Kart Tour, which is a gacha game. Do you know what that is?
What's that?
A gacha game is the idea of you're effectively gambling, but the way that the company skirts the idea of gambling is you're paying real money to buy in-game currency and then using that in-game currency to gamble, which makes it not gambling somehow.
Oh, okay, I get you. Because like I was watching, this is so weird that we are getting to a point where we now have like internet historians who are doing like actually like intriguing pieces. There is a YouTuber, I want to say her name is like Red Mage or something like that. Or Red Bard. Red Bard sounds right. And she kind of like has an expertise in anime and Japanese culture, and she was talking about Guy Online, and they were one of the, I think they might have even, no, they weren't in the 2010s, but their rise and then their fall had a lot to do with them creating this own currency within their own universe to like make it easier for people to do whatever gay anime shit they were doing.
Right.
So like that, this has just become, but that was like really weird and unusual for the time. Are you saying like this is now way more like this is just the norm?
This is the norm. Like,
wow.
So the idea with a gacha game, and there are a lot of different variants of this sort of thing, but the idea in Mario Kart Tour, using this as an example, you you get rubies. Rubies are the currency that you get periodically through like a daily check-in, or if you do X in the game.
But it's a lot easier.
But you also
to
can
buy
pay
them.
$3.99 to get like 6 rubies.
And $4 just feels like a small enough number that you're like, I don't necessarily feel like I'm breaking my bank.
So
to
here's
do
where it gets crazy. So in this game, 5 rubies allows you to access a pipe, and the pipe generates during each tour, which is a fixed period in the game, the chance of getting a high-end kart racer or kart or glider.
Oh, and that's where it just becomes like straight up gambling.
Straight up gambling, because you have a 1 in 100 chance of getting this high-end character. However, if you happen to submit 45, then you get 10. So it like you're encouraged to be doing 45, but it gets even more insidious than that, because on top of all of that like gambling mechanic, there's also, you can just pay $60 to get Rosalina and this one specific pipe, or in this one specific cart, and 45 rubies.
Man, being rich people ruin the fun of everything.
But here's where the price anchor is.
Yeah.
The price anchor is the gold pass, which you pay $5 for a month, and it unlocks like additional bonuses you get for achieving whatever.
So they nickel and dime you.
So everyone is basically to look at this like, I'm not going to pay $70 to get Luigi and like some gems or whatever, or pay $3 to get like 3 rubies and like some coins. $5 seems like a good deal to get all this other stuff. That's the price anchor. So everything is built around to drive you to this one thing.
Oh, it's like the equivalent. It's like Black Friday when they all are like, look how cheap our TVs are today. But like what they did was they just had them wildly overpriced the rest of the year.
Yeah.
It's like those same sort of things, like that's the getcha sort of thing. Wow.
And so there are a lot of games that are running this sort of gotcha system where it's like, oh, you can sign up, like another Nintendo game, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, just launched a similar subscription-based model within their game, which they hadn't had for a really long time.
Is the free-to-play version like still as fun? Can you get as much satisfaction?
You can, if you choose to play the game in just like, I'm trying to get a high score, but there are certain elements of like, oh, I'm playing on this track, I don't have access to these characters because I haven't used the pipe enough, because I'm not getting enough rubies. So it's like
virtually unwinnable that way.
Yes, it's everything about the game is really driving you to be paying for a subscription. We're spending far too much time on this. We've already decided this is a Slytherin.
It's fascinating. I don't know anything about this shit.
But to move on, so that's in the gaming space, specifically mobile gaming, although that sort of stuff with like V-Bucks and whatnot, like with it's all bad. It's not good.
Do you could we say the 2010s have brought us any good like developments in gaming? Do you feel like there's even more mainstream acceptance of being a video game player now?
Oh, absolutely. I would definitely, and I would say that if you're looking to become a game developer, it is easier than ever to like do that. There are so many tools readily available and so many platforms like Itch.io or itch.io is like a platform where you can just upload your builds for free seemingly and charge whatever you want, or just make them free. So there's like, and that's one of the things that like where I'm now working, we've got like a whole charity event like built around indie games. And that's like, it's really exciting to just be like, oh, everyone can make games. So in the indie scene, like we're seeing a lot of really experimental, cool stuff. And
there was the rise of Twitch this decade.
Yes, Twitch, like live streaming in general.
Everything. Which just changed digital entertainment in general.
Live streaming and cord cutting have been big in terms of entertainment.
Oh, the cord cutting. Yeah, because you know what? I can speak on the fact that if you're a cord cutter, it fundamentally changes how you can interact with other people.
Yes.
I've been poor. I haven't had a lot of money the past 10 years. If there was cable in my house, it was just because somebody else wanted it. I haven't had it myself.
Right.
So like there are huge swaths of like popular culture that I just won't know what people are talking
Right.
about because I'm not somebody who's still like being like, okay, at this time on this day I'm gonna watch this show or I'm gonna have access to all of these sports things. It's like very much like my frame of reference are people who are on digital platforms
Mm-hmm.
the way that like younger generations are.
Mm-hmm.
I can sometimes relate more in the way that I ingest my media than people my own age and older people.
Right.
Because I just have been a cord cutter since like 2010.
Right. And so, I mean, we've seen so many subscription services roll out. Like just this year was both Disney Plus and Apple TV Plus, which I admittedly dived on the Disney Plus train earlier than I wanted to. I was like, I'll hold off.
And literally everyone else. Don't worry about it.
I feel I was like going to hold out, and then my mom, she texted me before 6 a.m. saying, "Where can I get a Baby Yoda plushie?"
Oh,
and so
Baby Yoda itself may be the biggest story of the 2010s.
And so dumb. So I then was
also immediately posed the question because I'm not getting Disney Plus. I was like, is there a Baby Jar Jar? Is this Muppet Babies? But in Star Wars,
not yet.
Turns out, spoiler, if you haven't watched The Mandalorian, that's not even the Yoda that I know. Apparently, that's another Yoda.
Well, so the thing is, Yoda's species is unknown. Like, if you go to Wikipedia, it's not a listed species.
There's the Yoda Jedi Master that we all know and love. There's like Baby Yoda, and isn't there like one other creature who's like oh, we're pretty sure that's the same species as the Yoda?
I feel like I know what you're talking about, but I don't 100% know
for
sure. But basically, the Baby Yoda is officially known as the child.
Yeah.
And so...
Although, like, isn't he like 50 years old?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's another Edwin from Twilight thing. I'm like, nope, that's a creep. That's a creep who just has a weird fetish, who wants you to hold him and give him a bottle.
But like, yeah, in the Star Wars universe, George Lucas...
I was talking about Twilight when I said that.
No, I understand that. George Lucas went on record and said that, like, he didn't want Yoda's species to be a known thing or like abundant.
Yeah, because
which is cool.
Mystery creates like intrigue.
Yeah.
Maybe we're in the decade where people don't necessarily care about intrigue and mystery anymore. I feel like everything is very much on the nose.
Oh no, I would disagree, because I would say in the age of prestige TV, like the thing that keeps us like going is the like lore of the world and the intrigue. Like,
but there's also an expectation that there be twists and shit like that.
That's
true. Even that, like, if you're sitting down to watch a prestige TV show, you're like, I'm about to see some wild shit, and I don't know what's gonna happen. I gotta binge all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like there is. I feel even like TV, even like
binging is another one that, in terms of entertainment, is like this decade.
Yeah,
has
because I feel like reality TV dominates our culture so heavily that while like the 90s and the 2000s are where it really started to the fermentation of what it was, it's now, it impacts literally everything that we ingest. Like young people, they're watching YouTubers who are basically, for the most part, the ones who are making money. They're living out a lifestyle of like self-produced reality TV. If you think about that when I realized that, I was like, oh, that's all that is. That is reality TV, where the people who are the craziest are the ones who are also in the editing.
It's a bite-sized, like very hyper-produced,
and then
reality.
The leader of our government right now is a reality show star, and he plays his administration as though he's on a reality show.
That's true.
And so I would say reality TV is probably the biggest thing of our decade.
So we just covered like 6 different things when talking media.
And I'm going to put it all in Hufflepuff because I don't want to remember what we talked. No, just kidding.
So the rise and proliferation of reality TV, where would you place that?
I would place that at in Slytherin. It's very much all about like the like everybody. A lot of it is all about like who am I? What's my special story? What's my angle? It also, I feel like that sort of like created also the culture that we all have to feel like we have personal brand.
Oh yeah.
Social media changed like the point that's like everything is processed in like a very reality TV way. Like how can I elevator pitch myself when you just go to like my Twitter or whatever, like that, like that sort of thing. So I put it as a Slytherin. It just really made us all way more inward gazing and like self-involved in a way that I was only used to me and my friends big as comedians.
In terms of live streaming, I was just thinking about this. I think live streaming as a whole, while you could categorize it as like, oh, it's so predatory because everyone's like, look at me, I'd actually argue that it's a Hufflepuff.
I would too, because it also is just a lot of people making their living, or like just like being like, I'm passionate about this,
right,
and hardworking, but also it doesn't necessarily always get the respect that it deserves. A lot of people are like, oh, that's like Zoomer shit. That's
and like the thing with live streaming is at least for me, and maybe this is just like because that's how we've used the platform so much at work, is it's really good for like positive initiatives, like raising money for charity. Really, live streaming has replaced the like telethon.
Yeah.
And but with so much more engagement with the community that I feel it creates like a better and more positive just overall sense.
And I would say that it's Slytherin / Gryffindor tendencies also are like the parasocial relationships that it can create by doing it, because it's an even more than like YouTube. It's an even more, until they started live streaming, immediate like sense of like feedback reaction.
Yes.
Feedback reaction, like feeling beholden to your audience in a way.
And then in terms of cord cutting as like an overall like cord cutting / streaming services,
it depends on whose perspective you are. Slytherin on the side of the people who are like creating these mega corporations that control the art that we're making and are going to affect the way that we're going to be able to make art
and dictating like how it can be seen and who can see it.
Yeah, and so we end up having fucking Tom Holland crying drunk on the phone to get his part back as Spider-Man. But on the side of people having more autonomy to be like, I don't necessarily need these things. I'm going to only watch what I want, and having like just the way that you have the freedom of the internet to be like, really, what are my passions? There's so much more stuff out there. I feel like that's more of a Gryffindor.
Oh, I was thinking kind of a Ravenclaw.
Oh, why is that?
In the fact that you're able to really curate and dive deep, because like, for example, that like HBO is going to have more of this and Netflix is going to have more of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, in general, like we've definitely seen more niche programming, and knowing like, oh, if I'm like want to sign up for NBC's Peacock streaming service, like that's the I guess maybe curation doesn't necessarily lend itself to a Ravenclaw, but I do think that like I just saw it as like the Dewey Decimal System, and like looking through and going like, I want these types of books.
Yeah.
And that sort of experience is more properly curated through a streaming platform, because like if you go to Disney Plus, like specifically what you're getting.
The Simpsons.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Lisa's a Disney princess.
It's very weird. We have a lot of unique Disney princesses now.
So yeah, I think that's all fair. Should we end up there, or are there any other hard-hitting
I mean, we've got a lot of things that we can touch on still, like the rise of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies.
That nerd shit. That's some Ravenclaw shit. That's fair. I think it's been an insane decade. It's like been very accelerationist.
There's so much more. It sounds like you want to wrap things up, but we've got to talk on a few more things, Reed.
Oh, what? No, if you got your list, let's do the checklist.
I mean, things that we still haven't touched on. In 2013, Edward Snowden leaked a bunch of NSA documents just talking about like us being monitored as people.
I think like, yeah, it all like the government just a big old Slytherin. Like, that's on like I think.
But
that's
I would say that leak itself was a Gryffindor.
Yes.
And because now it's actually crazy to me that Snowden hasn't been assassinated yet.
Yeah. No, for real. I'm like, and I think it is only because like that stuff gets documented more easily now. Like it's the internet like protects him as much as it was like the thing that like put him at risk by leaking all that shit. That's like, yeah, he would have been gone if this had happened like 40 years ago, I imagine.
It's that and like leaking of NSA documents, WikiLeaks, and like whistleblowers in general, of just like a proliferation of information, I would say by and large is a Gryffindor.
Yeah.
They're bold. I mean,
causing revolutions, always a Gryffindor.
Is like a more minor thing, but still like it's notable in the world of sports. We had the
that entire area that I don't ever think
well,
about.
like it's a minor thing, but I would say like Michael Phelps became the most decorated Olympian. He now has 23 gold medals, which is a staggering number.
That's wild.
When he broke the record, it was just getting 22 in 2012, and I'm not sure if it was that year or like subsequent years that he then got the 23rd.
Would we say that that's probably a safe Gryffindor sort
it's
of move?
Probably a safe Gryffindor. Yeah, it's just like what a accomplishment.
I do know a sports thing we can do. I think it was this year too. Wasn't it? Because like in wrestling, which has seen kind of resurgence in popularity.
You're talking like
professional wrestling, not like high school wrestling. A lot when I would watch wrestling like kind of casually, because it's just really nice to see big oily men throwing each other around.
Sure.
The women's wrestling was always an afterthought. It was a joke, and it was just to like largely objectify them. Every once in a while, you would have like legit stars, and all of them were super talented, and you could tell could do really good work if they were given a chance. But it wasn't it even just like this year that they got like their first like legit all women's pay-per-view special?
You're asking me that question as if I would know that as someone who's never watched wrestling.
Either way, just like from like casually hearing about it feels like there's been like a real big turnaround and being like, no, these are legitimate athletes
who are
putting themselves on the line just as much as the men.
I would say overall women in sports have like there's been we're taking this more seriously. Like the women's soccer team, for example, is like everyone is like, oh, they're very good.
Or like having to like the bounce back of like Williams like being disrespected.
Oh yeah.
All the time essentially, and being like, oh, would she be getting this treatment if she were a man? I like that these conversations are getting pushed more aggressively. Yeah, I feel like that's some Gryffindor shit.
To that end, we in 2013 had the rise of fourth wave feminism, which I'm sure you can talk on.
Yeah, a little bit. Because like I was saying to you a little bit before, the way that you can really unpack the fourth wave, or would we call this post-feminism? I'm not like an expert, is you kind of have to like compare it to the previous waves,
right? And
say like and criticize like, okay, here's how it was helping people with a marginalized gender identity. That's what I like to say instead of just women. It's like, you know, gay people and trans people, non-binary people, even just like straight gender non-conforming people, we're all affected by the patriarchy. Straight people, men are affected by the patriarchy in different ways. And we all call this feminism, which makes people mistake. In my opinion, that's my definition. We think it's just women's issues when I think it's just like, how is everyone affected when we're in a male-dominated society? That's how I think of it. So in the third wave, in reaction to the second wave, which was really like, first wave was all about like, let's get votes and not be considered property.
Craziness.
Some of us, if you're black, wait until the 60s. And then the second wave was really all about like, what's our place in the job, in the working sphere now that we aren't necessarily like just allowed to go out in the workplace.
Right, now that we have more autonomy, like,
or women want to have we're starting to think about our reproductive rights, and we're like setting up like underground abortion clinics if we need to. That would be like, I think, second wave.
Oh, that's still second wave?
Yeah. Third wave came more into like more of like even higher processes of like what's owning our own sexuality, and then like continuing the like the reproductive rights conversation. And then fourth wave is kind of like, as far as I can tell, and if somebody is more educated, please correct me, yell at me. I'm
sure we'll get some corrections on Twitter on a lot of stuff we've touched on. It's starting
to think about how is like girl power with the peace sign up in the air, like your Spice Girl. How is it actually useful if it's not making all marginalized people's lives better? Like if we, like.
So it's being more hypercritical of it's like what is reductive and what is...
Yes, it's looking at those Dove ads where it's like, all bodies are beautiful, but you're going to be the most beautiful if you use our products.
Right.
Like that sort of false sense. Or like...
being able to identify what is actually raising up and furthering just trying to get uniformity of equality across genders versus what is... a false pretense.
Because because a lot of feminist politics, like, God knows I'm the last guy to be like identity politics, but like there is like a certain part of it of like identity politics are most useful when we're talking about large groups. When we're talking about like individual representation, it is good, but it doesn't necessarily, like, one gay person becoming rich and powerful doesn't help the gay population if that powerful and rich individual doesn't use their influence
right
to like better everyone's lives. And so I think fourth wave is being much more like, how are we thinking more about like our future generations? Even
it goes
like,
it goes back to almost the representation in media of, hey, if we are looking to raise everyone up, we need to be like throughout our rise, we need to be doing that as well.
And it's really taking to task a lot of our academics and a lot of our people who were not listening to more marginalized voices, who were just as who have just as much insight, have just as much intelligence. They just don't necessarily have the same frame of reference, the same way that they talk about these subjects. And I think, I'm really interested to see where post-feminism, I think that's one of the ways that we talk about it, or in fourth wave, but I don't want to conflate them entirely if they are not the same thing.
Understood.
We're in a really interesting time in gender politics, because we're even also figuring out how non-binary people fit into the conversation, because, a lot of people aren't men or women, but we have the same issues that men and women face individually. And it's very interesting to see how the next decade's going to play out with all that.
Yeah. Where do we sort?
Gryffindor.
Simple, straightforward.
Or
maybe Hufflepuff.
Maybe Hufflepuff, because
like,
it really
but would that be like feminism overall?
Because
is
a lot
Hufflepuff?
of this has to come down to like a lot of the problems of the patriarchy have to reconcile the fact that we're not good at processing our feelings and culturally, and like that feelings are like,
feelings are tough.
Right wingers are always so like fascinated with detaching themselves from their feelings and saying my ideas and my feelings are different things.
But they are necessarily.
Feeling can be like, intuition can be just as powerful and helpful to you. It just doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily as reliable. You know what I mean? As just like rational thought in quotation marks.
Right.
And also rational thought sometimes gets, sometimes things that are very much feelings get described as rational thought. It all comes down to like who's getting to be calling their opinions empirical.
It's always interesting when you can like catch someone filtering a notion into fact.
Yes.
And if you're like, that's not anything tangible what you just presented.
Yeah.
That's a processed idea that you've managed to attach to a thing.
Yeah.
And you're saying those two things are connected, and they are
and
not.
A lot of it usually comes down
I know
to
I'm
cognitive
speaking
dissonance.
abstractly.
Yeah, so
but,
like I would say a Hufflepuff is probably a great one to sort that into.
Also speaking sort of on we've touched on it a little bit, but in 2015 US legalized gay marriage.
Yes, and that is another tricky thing under the same, because I feel like all of this, like gay marriage was a big success for a lot of people, because for a lot of it really like is a symbol of like, we are at least not going to be told that we're not the same kind of people.
It's being seen.
Yeah.
And that's important.
But a lot of queer people would argue that that was a Band-Aid for a shotgun wound. That like saying like, okay, you can have this business arrangement with another person. Because like a lot of people are like, what is marriage but a business arrangement?
Right.
With romantic entanglements, with emotions involved.
Largely, yes.
Yeah, but you are like, you're committing to each other in the eyes of the government and your church. And your church historically would also have a lot of financial influence over you. And so for gay people, we were saying, okay, on a systematic level, did getting gay marriage make gay people's lives better? Are we able to, like, does that get us all health care that we desperately need? No. Does that help us to not face discrimination and in the workplace? No. Unless you can like further and further assimilate yourself to straight culture and have the kind of relationships that straight people have, the harder time you have. So like it just helped those people who are like, I just want to fit in. I want to have what you would call like a regular life, a straight life, within like the gay parameters. I don't know. I feel like that one's tricky. I don't know where I feel about where that would be sorted. How about you?
I mean, I think if you just look at it on its face with the intention behind it, granted, whose intention?
Yeah, I'm like, if it was just to kind of placate the gay community and like help us not look at our larger issues like the HIV epidemic shit, I feel like that's a Slytherin move.
But I think if it is just trying to be like, hey, this is a thing that we feel everybody should have, it's a Hufflepuff.
And it's like an incremental good.
Right.
That's Hufflepuff. Yeah.
Like I wouldn't go so far to say it's a Gryffindor. I wouldn't call it a Ravenclaw.
No. Especially since it is so messy on like the whole, like, how does this actually rationally make things better?
As someone who wants to inherently believe that people can be good, I want to say Hufflepuff. But I recognize if that opinion is disagreed with. With that said, closing things out, but not fully closing things out. Just
finally, I was trying to get out of this episode minutes ago.
I know we're nearing the end. I've got a few more on my long list.
Like, it almost feels as though it's been a while, but obviously we've been recording episodes this entire time.
All of 2019.
It feels like we took a decade break, and now we're like, wait, what do we gotta catch up. Hold on, bitch.
There's also been a rise in like the private sector sort of entering fields that it otherwise hasn't been. Like SpaceX is a perfect example of
as far as like companies, the company being like, I do this thing that used to be like a nationalized only thing.
Right. Like the fact that we had, I forget which rocket, and I'm sure like if Alex, my roommate, were like able to hear me right now, he'd yell it, is like SpaceX had one of its ships like connect with the International Space Station. That's huge.
Yeah. Elon Musk just putting a car in space, that's huge. It's like, it's dumb, but it's huge.
It is the Falcon 9 rocket. Alex leans in.
Just like apparated out of nowhere to let us know what it was.
I spoke a little bit louder because I heard him in the next room. But the Falcon 9, and then there was also like what was it? The dragon that landed back down.
Come in here, Alex. This is the space episode now.
Also the Falcon 9.
The dragon is the spacecraft that goes to the space station.
Gotcha.
God bless you.
But like those are things that like NASA hasn't done that.
No, that's like, this is like some it's like, it reminds me of like Howard Hughes just being like, I'm rich, I'm gonna make my own airplane.
Right, which I think like, I mean, we dunk on Elon Musk for a lot of weird things, like for the cyber truck and like smoking weed on
that Grimes Azalea Banks shit.
Yeah, but
he's insane. He's a terrible person. He tried to make that dude out to be a pedophile just because he got embarrassed.
Yeah.
But he is revolutionary in terms of like his influence. It's fucking bonkers.
And we're like, the fact that we might have public space travel, I would go so far to say like
within our lifetime,
maybe even next decade.
Yeah, we're gonna get a publicly owned space exploration possibility. We're gonna get a truck that looks like it had PS1 graphics rendered. He's giving it to us all, baby.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say that SpaceX and like other just like commercial proliferation into spaces that have largely been government, I would say is a Gryffindor.
Are there any other spaces?
I mean, that's the one that immediately comes to mind, but I know like there, like if you look to things like Uber and Lyft, that disrupted public transit. Like,
oh, absolutely.
You know, like, and I would say arguably for the better, because it made a lot of like the MTA just go like, oh shit, we need to like be better.
Oh, I feel like it's one of those things that like was so bad that it like had some good fallout, like as collateral damage.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily just like, I would describe things like Uber and Lyft in their isolation.
We didn't talk about the gig economy.
What?
The gig economy.
Oh yeah,
which is what Uber. Let's just call that, because we've talked about it before. That's a solid slither in itself.
Yeah,
yeah, in like terms of like there are minor things like sometimes, like, you know, like a right clock is twice a day. Yes. Oh God, my brain's broken. The fact that, like you said, MTA has to think about more like, oh, how can we entice people to get back on the train? It also made it so that, you know, we had our DUI levels go down like in major cities.
Yeah.
Because people are like, oh, I will just go ahead and not drive my car. But it's just mostly just like a nightmare system of people being exploited for their labor over and over again. So like I put blanket gig economy as a Slytherin.
Yeah, I'd agree. And then I'm trying to think of like,
and I would honestly say the whole like you got to hustle and grind mentality, which has always been part of American exceptionalism, but I feel like it became even more aggressive in the last decade.
I think it's just the pushback from boomer generation on millennials.
That's fair. Yeah, we're all working ourselves to fucking death.
Yeah, it's the okay boomer meme, like in personification. But I don't know if there are a few other items that I have on the list, but I feel like we've talked to exhaustion. Unless there are any other.
If we missed any, write us and we'll do another one within the next decade.
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, we are recording this in the middle of December, so there's nothing to say that there might not be like one other cataclysmic thing, but like, 2012, we didn't die with the Mayans as they thought. Like, so
that was some goofball shit. Like, what if that did? Like, I love that conspiracy theory that it did end, and that's why everything's unraveling.
And that's why everything is just like going to hell.
Yeah, that's why everything feels like one of those weird like memes that people make where they just sew together a bunch of disparate media things and then it's like a collage of shit. Mm-hmm. That's just what existence feels like now.
It is crazy just in reflecting back on what happened just this year and going, oh my God, that felt like 74 years
Yeah, like
ago.
Sean Spicer on Dancing with the Stars is like the clearest example I can give of like, what the fuck is happening to reality?
It's a wild world we live in. But if you'd like to be hearing more from Reed or myself, Reed, where can they be finding more of you?
Oh, you can find me at that dang dingus on both Instagram and Twitter. And Michael, you are at Belated Media, correct?
Correct, on Twitter, but Baratellium on Instagram. If we're throwing out Instagrams.
Yeah. I mean, go look at Michael's beautiful face. I don't know why I said it that way. Get me out of here.
You like leaned in real hard on that.
We're rusty, baby.
Well, you'll hear from us on another episode of The Sorting Hat. Bye, all.
Bye.